The testimonies featured on this channel are presented as received, reflecting the personal experience and perspectives of the individuals who have generously shared them with us. We do not verify or authenticate the events described. We encourage our viewers to approach these testimonies with compassion and understanding, as these are personal testimonies of people involved. We also encourage you to always refer to the Holy Bible and the teachings of Jesus Christ and his apostles for guidance. Life is full of mysteries. Some we understand, and some remain hidden beyond the grasp of our minds. But what if I told you that a man of God, a devoted Catholic priest, had an experience so terrifying, so extraordinary, that it changed his entire understanding of Jesus Christ? What if I told you that the Jesus he had worshipped and preached about for decades was not who he thought he was? Father John had been a priest for over 30 years. He had baptized babies, heard confessions, and performed the sacred rituals of the Catholic Church. He believed he knew Jesus, but one day his heart stopped beating. He slipped from this world into the next, and what he saw shattered everything he believed. His near-death experience was not peaceful. It was not the bright tunnel of light that many described. No, his journey was one of horror, deception, and ultimately truth. As he drifted from life into death, he found himself in a place he never expected, a place that looked like heaven but hid a terrifying secret. He saw things that no human mind was meant to witness. And when he came back, he was never the same. Tonight, you will hear his story in his own words. Prepare yourself, for this is not just a tale. This is a warning. Let's hear from John.
I remember the day clearly. It was a Sunday morning. I had just finished Mass and was standing in the sacristy when I felt a sharp pain in my chest. At first, I thought it was just exhaustion, but within seconds, the pain became unbearable. My vision blurred, and my knees buckled. The last thing I remember was the sound of the church bell ringing as I collapsed. Then silence. I opened my eyes and found myself in a place of overwhelming peace. The air was filled with a sweet fragrance, and soft golden light surrounded me. I saw a vast field with flowers of colors I had never seen before. It was beautiful, unlike anything on earth. I knew immediately I had died, but I was not afraid. I felt a presence beside me, strong and comforting. A being of light stood there, smiling at me. I thought it was Jesus. He had a radiant glow, his eyes filled with warmth. He reached out his hand and said, "Welcome home, John." My heart swelled with joy. This was it. This was heaven, or so I thought. As I walked with him, I noticed something strange. The further we went, the more I felt a coldness creeping into my soul. The golden light began to dim, and the fragrance in the air faded. The beautiful fields became lifeless, and the flowers wilted. The being beside me still smiled, but his eyes, they had changed. I stopped walking. A deep sense of dread filled my heart. "Jesus," I whispered. He turned to me, and for the first time I saw it. His smile was too perfect, too practiced. His eyes held no love, only amusement. I took a step back. Who are you?" The being laughed. There was a sound that shook the ground beneath me. Then, in an instant, his face twisted. His glow turned into a burning fire. His hands became claws, and his smile, oh, that smile. It stretched wider and wider until it was nothing but darkness. "This is your Jesus, John," he hissed. "The one you worshipped, the one you thought you knew." Terror gripped me. This was not Jesus. This was a deception, a lie so perfect that I had believed it. I turned to run, but the ground beneath me crumbled. I was falling into a pit of endless darkness. Screams filled the air. Souls, millions of them, crying out in agony. I saw priests, bishops, even popes. Men I had once admired. Now nothing but wretched, suffering spirits. I landed with a painful thud. The air was thick with the smell of sulfur. Shadows moved around me, whispering my name. And then, I saw him, the real Jesus. He was nothing like the paintings, nothing like the figure I had preached about. His presence was overwhelming. His eyes, filled with sorrow and love, pierced into my soul. His robe was stained with blood, and his hands bore wounds so deep that light shone through them. He looked at me with a mixture of pain and disappointment. "You never knew me, John," he said softly. "You knew religion, you knew rituals, but you did not know me." Tears streamed down my face. I thought I was serving you." He shook his head. "You served the image of me that the world created. But I am not of this world." I fell to my knees. "Forgive me, Lord." And then I woke up. I was back in the sacristy, lying on the floor. The paramedics surrounded me, their voices frantic. But all I could do was weep, because I had seen the truth. Jesus is not who we think he is. And heaven is not guaranteed for those who simply believe. It is only for those who truly know him. When I woke up in the sacristy, my body was alive, but my soul felt different, like it had been torn apart and stitched back together. The paramedics were checking my pulse, speaking in urgent voices, but I barely heard them. My mind was still trapped in what I had seen. I had been deceived. I had spent my entire life worshiping an image of Jesus that wasn't real. And now I couldn't unsee the truth. But the worst part, that wasn't the end of my journey. Even as I lay there on the church floor, I felt a pull. Something was calling me back. Before I could even process what was happening, my vision blurred again. The sounds around me faded. And just like that, I was back in the realm beyond life. Only this time, I wasn't in the false paradise. I was standing on the edge of a great chasm. The sky above me was dark, swirling with violent clouds that crackled with red lightning. The ground beneath me was cracked and scorched, as if it had been burned for eternity. A terrible heat rose from the depths below, but I wasn't in hell. At least, not yet. I heard a voice behind me, deep, sorrowful. It was him, Jesus, the real Jesus. He stood there, watching me with eyes that held an unbearable weight of sadness. The wounds in his hands and feet were open, but they didn't bleed. Instead, they glowed with a divine light, as if his suffering was an eternal reminder of what he had done for humanity. "John," he said. His voice was like thunder, but it carried no anger, only grief. "Do you understand now?" I trembled. "Lord, I don't know what to believe anymore." He stepped closer, and the very air around me trembled with his presence. "You were taught to worship me through tradition," he said, his voice like a heavy wind. "But I am not a tradition. You preached about me, but you did not know my heart. You wore my name, but you did not carry my cross." Tears burned my eyes. "Then who have I been worshiping all these years?" Jesus slowly turned his gaze toward the chasm. I followed his eyes, and what I saw made my blood turn to ice. Across the great divide, a massive figure stood in the shadows. It was the same being that had deceived me before, the false Jesus, the one who had welcomed me into the illusion of heaven. But now, he no longer wore the mask of kindness. His body was twisted, his face a mockery of divinity. His eyes burned with an unnatural fire, and yet, he still looked like Jesus. Terrible realization dawned on me. The world had been worshiping a counterfeit. The being smiled at me from across the chasm. "Oh, John," he sneered, "you almost had me fooled. But you belong to me." A wave of unspeakable terror rushed over me. "No," I whispered. "No, I don't." But the false Christ only laughed. "You followed my voice your entire life. You bowed before my image. You called upon my name, but you never truly sought the one who sent me." I fell to my knees. "Lord," I cried out to Jesus, "tell me it isn't true." Jesus extended his hand and helped me to my feet. "The greatest deception is not in the world, John," he said. "It is in the church." I stared at him, horrified. "What do you mean?" "The enemy does not need to pull people into darkness if he can keep them blind in the light," Jesus said. "He does not need to take them into sin if he can keep them trapped in religion." I shook my head. "But Lord, I thought I was serving you. I was a priest. I gave my life to you." Jesus' eyes pierced into my soul. "Did you? Or did you give your life to an institution?" A sharp pain shot through my chest. I had spent decades believing I was leading people to Christ, but was I leading them to Him or to a system that had replaced Him? I looked at Jesus again, truly seeing Him for the first time. He was nothing like the stained glass images, nothing like the golden statues, nothing like the figure on the crosses in every church I had served in. He was raw, He was real, He was sorrowful, and above all, He was longing for His people to know Him. "The church has made me a stranger," He said, His voice heavy with grief. "They speak of me, but they do not seek me. They call me Lord, but they do not listen to my voice. And so, another has taken my place in their hearts." I turned back toward the false Christ across the chasm. He was still there, still smiling. And suddenly I understood. He didn't need to drag people to hell. All He had to do was let them think they were already in heaven, and they would never seek the real Jesus. I fell to my knees. "Lord," I sobbed, "what must I do?" Jesus reached out and touched my forehead. The moment His hand made contact, a surge of unbearable power coursed through me. My body burned as if it were being purified by holy fire. Every false belief, every deception, every lie I had embraced, it was all being torn from my soul. And then, I woke up again. I was back in the hospital. A doctor was standing over me, looking astonished. "Father John," he said, You were dead for 23 minutes. I barely heard him. My mind was still trapped in the vision. I had died. I had seen the false heaven. I had seen the real Jesus. And now I was alive again. But I was no longer the same man. I could no longer preach the same messages. I could no longer serve the same church in the same way. Because now I knew the truth. And the truth would cost me everything. I lay in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding in my chest. I had just returned from death, 23 minutes gone, yet I had seen eternity. But the weight of what I had witnessed crushed me. I had spent my entire life believing I was serving Jesus, preaching about Him, baptizing in His name, leading thousands in prayer. But I had been blind. I had been worshiping a counterfeit, a false Christ who had taken the place of the real Jesus in the hearts of many. And now that I knew the truth, I could never go back. A nurse entered the room and gasped when she saw me awake. "Father John, you gave us a scare." I barely heard her. My mind was still trapped in that other world. The real Jesus had touched me, burned away the lies, and shown me a terrifying reality, one that I could never ignore. But what was I supposed to do now? I was a Catholic priest. My entire life, my entire identity, was tied to the church. The people who looked up to me, the priests who served alongside me, the bishops who guided me, none of them would believe what I had seen. Would they? I had to try. 2 weeks after my release from the hospital, I stood before my congregation. My hands trembled as I gripped the pulpit, my heart pounding in my chest. The church was full, just as it always was on Sundays. The faces looking up at me were filled with expectation. They thought I would preach the same message I had always preached. They had no idea that today, everything would change. I took a deep breath and began. "My brothers and sisters," I said, my voice unsteady, "I have something to confess." A ripple of confusion moved through the crowd. Some people leaned forward, others frowned. I swallowed hard. 2 weeks ago, I died. Gasps filled the air. People exchanged worried glances. I was gone for 23 minutes, and in that time, I saw eternity. I hesitated. How could I explain what I had seen? How could I put into words the horror, the deception, the truth? I continued. I stood before what I thought was heaven. I saw Jesus, at least I thought it was Him. He welcomed me, embraced me, but it was all a lie. Murmurs spread through the church. Some looked at me with concern, others with disbelief. I clenched the pulpit. I was deceived. I saw a Jesus who looked perfect, who sounded kind, who felt real. But He was a counterfeit. He was not the Jesus of the Bible. And I fear that many of us have been worshiping that same false Christ. A few people in the crowd gasped. Others shook their heads. A man in the front row crossed his arms, his face turning red. "I saw the real Jesus," I pressed on. "And he was nothing like the images we have been given. Nothing like the statues, the paintings, or even the figure we imagine in our prayers. He was raw, wounded, powerful beyond measure. And he was filled with sorrow, because we do not truly know him." Anger flared in the room. A woman stood up. "Father, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that we have been deceived." My voice rose, desperation creeping in. "That the enemy does not need to pull us into sin if he can keep us satisfied in a false faith. That millions, perhaps billions, of people believe they are following Christ when, in reality, they are following a lie." A priest who served with me jumped to his feet. "John, stop this. You are confused. You went through trauma, you." "I know what I saw." I cut him off. "And I cannot be silent. Not anymore." Silence fell. The weight of my words settled over the room. Some people looked shaken. Others looked furious. Then, from the back of the church, a single voice rang out. "What must we do?" It was an old man, one of the elders. His face was pale, his hands trembling. I took a deep breath. "Seek him," I said. "Not in the way we have been taught. Not through tradition, not through rituals, not through the comfort of routine faith. Seek him with everything. Ask him to show you the truth. Because if you do not know the real Jesus, then you do not know him at all." A heavy silence followed. Then chaos. Some people shouted in anger. Others wept. A few stormed out of the church. The other priests stared at me with a mixture of horror and fury. I knew what would happen next. And I was right. The church moved quickly. Within days, I was summoned before a council of bishops. They accused me of heresy, of losing my mind, of leading people astray. I told them the truth. They refused to listen. "We have followed these traditions for centuries," one of them said. "Do you really think you alone have discovered the truth?" I looked him in the eyes. "That's the problem," I said. "We have followed traditions, but we have not followed him." The decision was swift. I was stripped of my title, excommunicated, cast out. I had lost everything: my position, my reputation, my home. But I had gained the truth, and now I had only one mission left. I tell you this story not for my sake, but for yours, because the deception is still out there. The false Christ still reigns in the hearts of many. The enemy has disguised himself so perfectly that most will never realize it until it is too late. And so, I beg you, whoever you are, wherever you are, seek the real Jesus. Not the one painted in cathedrals, not the one sculpted in marble, not the one presented through centuries of carefully crafted doctrine. Seek the one who still bears the wounds of the cross, the one whose eyes burn with truth, the one who longs for you to know him as he truly is. Because if you do not know the real Jesus, then when you step into eternity, you may find yourself in a paradise that isn't paradise at all. And by the time you realize the truth, it may be too late.